Hey everyone, this is Dan. Let's talk about Taiwan Semiconductor, TSM. First of all, I'd like to mention that my target for TSM is still at $160 by the end of 2021. In the next few minutes, I'll be talking about the charts, and then I'll go into the fundamental analyses, including looking at the financial statements and some of the figures on the statements. I'll look at a competitive landscape. I'll talk about my own valuation of the company, and then we'll discuss the other analysts' opinions. Then we'll look at the patents and lawsuits, and finally we will look at the strategic advantages of TSM. Let's look at the charts. This is the daily chart for TSM. As of the last trading day, which was last Friday, February 12th, the market closed at 138.06, and my price target is 160. I see this nice bullish upward trending channel for the last 10 days or so. And then if you look at the RSI indicator, there was an overbought signal about 12-13 days ago, and sure enough, right after that, the price started to dip. And if you look at the DMI indicator, we got a buy signal way back, even beyond the left side of this chart. So it's been bullish ever since, according to DMI. The MACD signal is a little bit more sensitive and probably timely. After we see the warning signal from RSI, we saw the sell signal from MACD while the price was dropping. And then finally, we got a buy signal from MACD. Let's look at the hourly chart. First, we saw this upward trending channel during this period, starting from about 3 weeks ago, and it lasted for a couple weeks. And since then, it was replaced by this even more bullish upward trending channel, which is great if you own TSM stock. And then Friday closed at the last hour during aftermarket with this bullish candlestick, which is a side-by-side white line signal. And if you look at RSI, there was a warning signal here indicating an overbought situation during last Thursday, followed by a bearish sell signal from MACD that came about just around market open time last Friday. Going forward in the next few days, it's important for us to see whether the price will be supported by the lower boundary of this channel. If the price is going to be supported by this channel, I will most likely buy more shares. Let's look at the 15-minute chart and look at the trades I made in the last couple of months. I bought my first batch of TSM shares back on January 26th at the price of 126.93. At that time, I decided I wanted to use a strategy to hold on to half of my shares for long-term gain, and then the other half I will use for swing trading. And then on February 10th, when the price peaked temporarily and started to show this big red candlestick going down, I sold at 134.17 with a nice gain of about at least 6-7%. But that's only half of my shares, and since then I've been waiting for an entry point. And fortunately or unfortunately, the price has been going up and up, so it's been difficult for me to get back in again, although I still have 50% of my shares bought back on January 26th. Comes tomorrow, which is Tuesday, if the price will be supported by this trend line, I will most likely buy in again. As far as the other technical indicators, we saw this overbought warning signal from RSI during pre-market on Friday, and sure enough, the price started to dip in the next 2-3 hours, and that bearish signal was confirmed by DMI, confirmed by MACD, although MACD came a little bit late, and then finally MACD turned bullish during aftermarket, and DMI is just about to send a bullish buy signal during the last couple of hours on Friday. And then also the second to the last candlestick on Friday was a bullish Marubozu signal. Hopefully, when the market opens up tomorrow, the price will go up. And if it does start to go up, I will most likely buy more shares. That's why it's important for us to monitor whether the price will be supported by this yellow line. At this point, I'd like to say that if you like what you've seen so far, I would very much appreciate if you can click the like, subscribe, and notification button so that you can be notified when I post new videos in the future. Let's continue. Let's look at support and resistance. This is the 15-minute chart again. I see resistance at 139 and 140 for support. the most immediate support will come from this trend line as we talked about previously. And also I see supports at 137.5, 136.5, and 134. Let's look at some of the more recent events that are very bullish for TSM. Bazinga published this article back on January 25th saying that there is a shortage in the semiconductor industry, especially for the auto manufacturers. At this point, TSM as well as other semiconductor makers are ready to take advantage of this market shortage and increase their prices. That's very good news for TSM. Let's look at some of the financial figures for TSM. The market share is $587 billion. The annual revenues is $30 to $40 billion. And the 12-month free cash flow is $5.5 billion a year, and that's very healthy. The debt-to-equity ratio is 40.3%, and that's a very healthy number. Dividend yield is 1.07%, and the 12-month net earnings increase ending September 30th, 2020 was a whopping 41% increase from the previous 12-month period. The PE ratio is 58.9, and the forward PE ratio, according to Yahoo, is 28.7. And the PEG ratio is 1.34, which is a pretty good number. So financially, TSM is a very robust company overall. Let's look at the semiconductor foundry market shares. With the bar chart here running from 2017 until 2020, we can see TSM being represented by the light blue colored bar. As you can see, they've been occupying pretty much 50% of the market share in the last 3 years. If you zoom in the latest bar, 2020, TSM has 55.6% of the market share. They're by far the top leader in this industry. The next runner-up has only 16.4% of the market share, and that's Samsung Electronics. One thing about the semiconductor foundry business is that it takes a lot of money to build a new factory. A new factory costs somewhere between $1 to $4 billion. That's why it's not easy for any manufacturer to try and spend a few $1 billion, build a bunch of plants, and try and catch up with TSM. The barrier to entry is very steep, and that's protection for TSM. With regard to technologies related to this business, the semiconductors are measured usually by this key dimension, and the smaller the dimension, the faster the processor and the less energy it consumes. The latest generation of processors in mass production is 5 nanometer for this critical dimension. Then the previous generation is 7 nanometer. This is the information from Wikipedia. I summarize what they said by color codes. So without reading the detailed description, you can look at the yellow highlights. That's the semiconductor products in mass production by TSM. There are quite a few of them. And then the 7 nanometer semiconductor by Samsung is highlighted in red. There's only one of them. And then there's one by IBM. From this, you can see that TSM absolutely dominates this segment of the industry. Let's go to the latest generation chips, 5 nanometer. Again, TSM is highlighted in yellow. Samsung has one item. Actually, the only item of Samsung is not quite in mass production yet because they have quality pass rate issues. So they're still struggling with it. In the meanwhile, the latest generation of 5 nanometer chips provided by TSM have been powering the latest iPhone 12 as well as the Huawei Mate 40. Of course, as you know, the US government has prohibited Taiwan Semiconductor from supplying Huawei with any more 5 nanometer chips. Although from a business perspective, that sanction did not really hurt TSM too much because TSM was able to quickly backfill the orders with orders from other customers. Then as far as the next generation chips, they will be the 3 nanometer and 2 nanometer chips. TSM has announced that they plan to mass produce the 3 nanometer chips in the second half of 2022. And in the effort to catch up with TSM, Samsung announced that they will mass produce the 3 nanometer chips in 2021. Although Samsung has already fallen behind in the previous 2 generations of chips, at this point the jury is still out as to whether Samsung can actually fulfill their prediction. And then Intel announced that they would eventually build a 3nm chips, although their mass production is not going to be ready until 2025. Unfortunately, Intel is even farther behind than Samsung. Both TSM and Samsung are supposedly developing the 2nm chips. At the end of 2017, EU countries signed a joint declaration to develop the semiconductor industry, including the design of 2nm chips, although they're probably not going to be able to mass produce the chips until quite a few years later. In other words, TSM will continue to dominate the industry at least for the next 2-3 years, in my opinion. And that's why I'm so bullish about TSM. Let's look at my own valuation of TSM. First of all, I start with the top 11 chip makers, and I took the average of their forward PE ratio, which is 23.15. I applied that to TSM. And then I use an estimated earning growth of 24.5% per year for TSM in the next 2-3 years. And that's a very conservative estimate because, as I mentioned, their last 12-month earning growth was 41.2%. I then use their most up-to-date earnings, extrapolate the figures to 2021, 2022, and 2023, and arrived at my estimate of $160 a share. By the way, the PEG ratio for TSM is 1.34, which is a very robust number. Let's look at other analysts' opinions. Yahoo Finance rates TSM a 2 out of 5, which is a buy rating. The average target price is $127.85, and the current price is $138.06. So it's a little bit overpriced, but I'm not concerned because Yahoo still has a buy rating, after all. Louis Navellier, a very well-known analyst, his overall rating for TSM is a strong buy. TipRanks.com gives TSM a moderate buy rating. The target price on the high side is $149, the average is $111.5, and the low target among all analysts is $74 a share. For CNN Business, they gave TSM a buy rating, and the target price is on the high side, 200, medium, 148.25, and low, 74. These numbers are pretty much within the same ballpark with my estimate of $160 a share. TSM owns more than 39,000 patents worldwide. They have been hiring a lot of PhDs and engineers and scientists, so this is definitely not a copycat operation. Just in 2019 alone, they secured 3,600 patents worldwide, including 2,300 patents from the United States. And then in 2019, they settled a large lawsuit with Global Foundry Inc., and that's the biggest pending lawsuits they have according to their 10K report. Basically, I don't think TSM is under any more legal risks than any other semiconductor company. So I'm comfortable with where they are today from a patents and lawsuits perspective. Let's talk about the strategic advantages of TSM. First of all, they have a commanding lead in the 7nm and 5nm chip business, and their nearest competitors are Samsung and Intel. Both of them are at least 2 to 3 generations behind. And then TSM has 55.6% of the market share, which has a very high barrier to entry for competitors. They have excellent fundamentals, and they just recently secured more than 1,000 acres of land to build a $12 billion factory in Phoenix, Arizona in the United States. And they are poised to benefit from the worldwide semiconductor shortage. Again, at this point, I'd like to restate that my target for TSM is $160 by the end of 2021. If you are watching this video a few days after February 14, I'd like to remind you to check out the notes section below this video in case I've entered some updates. And if you like what you've seen so far, I would very much appreciate if you can click the like, subscribe, and notification button. That's for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much. As usual, I will welcome your comments, questions, and suggestions. I'd like to remind you that I'm not a financial advisor. You should make your own decision when you buy or sell financial instruments, and you should probably consult with your financial advisors before you do so. I share my trading strategies for educational purpose only. This about wraps up my video for now. I will chat with you again in the next few days. In the meanwhile, I'd like to wish you the very best with your financial investments.